Have you ever tried to capture your furry friend's playful moments in the snow, but ended up with disappointed pictures? Well, you're in the right place. In this video, we're going to go through some helpful tips and tricks for capturing your furry friends playing out in the snow. What's up? I'm Jay LeBlanc, wedding photographer and photography educator. Today we're going to be talking about taking pictures of your pets playing in the snow. Now, photographing in the snow comes with its whole set of challenges, but when it comes to photographing your pet, it makes it so much more enjoyable because you're out there with your best friend. In this video, I'm using the Canon R5 for shooting all of these pictures, but a lot of these principles can be applied to any camera. And before we get started, I think this goes without saying, but if we're gonna be taking pictures outside in the snow with our furry friends, make sure you dress appropriately. Make sure that you are wearing gloves that you can still operate your camera with, and make sure that you're able to withstand the temperatures and enjoy the time that you're spending with your best friend. Once you realize that you are getting some great images, you're probably gonna wanna stay out there even longer, so dress accordingly. And never underestimate how useful gloves are that you can still operate a touchscreen. Most modern cameras nowadays have a touchscreen on the back, or even if you're using a cell phone. Being able to keep your fingers nice and warm will definitely allow you to stay out there a little bit longer. Now for our first tip, we're gonna wanna trick our camera. When you're shooting in the snow, your camera's gonna wanna make everything a middle gray on a default setting. So our camera is going to see all of this white covered everything that's super bright, and it's gonna wanna dull it down a little bit. So we're gonna have to trick our camera. We're gonna have to tell our camera, nope, we don't wanna shoot our beautiful white snow as a middle gray. We wanna make that white and shoot the subject, our furry friend, with the correct exposure. Basically, you just want a good balance between your highlights and your shadows throughout the image. Now you might clip a little bit in the highlights depending on how much snow you have and how sunny it may or may not be. So go ahead, take a couple test shots, review them, and adjust your settings accordingly. If you're using a camera that has manual settings, you're gonna wanna look at either your histogram or your meter and expose slightly to the brighter side. Because with everything covered in snow, your camera's gonna wanna expose the image to the darker side by default. So a good way to trick your camera is get nice and close to your pet and get a good exposure of them up close, and then dial in your settings, and then allow them to run around and have some fun. And if you're using any of the auto modes on your camera, try adjusting the exposure compensation. This is that little plus minus setting that you're gonna have to tell your camera to make the image a little bit brighter or a little bit darker. And we're gonna always wanna go a little bit brighter because the camera by default is going to make all that white snow a little bit darker. Now when it comes to actually taking the picture, try using areas of contrast. With everything covered in snow, you're going to have a lot of contrast. Whether you're shooting an animal that has a darker coat, or you have maybe trees in the background, or a lake, or some other elements. Are you bored? So when I say use contrast to your advantage. Frame your pet or your subject within something that might be a little bit darker while everything else is covered in this white snow. This will allow your subject to pop off a little bit on the page because everything else is going to be plain white, but then you'll have this one area of contrast that your eye will naturally go to in the image. Now, on the other hand, if you have a pet that has maybe a lighter coat, maybe we're talking a nice blonde or even a white coat, maybe you put a tree or grass in the foreground to help raise the overall contrast of the image because everything's going to be white. And if your pet is also white, it's going to be really difficult to make them out in the picture sometimes. So get creative with different things that you can put into the image to create contrast. And continuing with everything covered in white, use it to your advantage as negative space in the image. Everything covered in this white snow will make for some really interesting pictures where you can use the negative space to really focus on your subject. Think about a nice, wide, open landscape with everything covered in white, and then you have just your furry friend running through the scene. And it's great for showing scale. You can have your pet off in the distance and everything covered in white, and then they're the only thing that you can see because they have a darker coat. It allows you to show the scale of the image because they're off in the distance, but they're still easily seen because everything else is so much negative space. Or maybe the snow just started falling and everything's not covered in white yet. Maybe we can use the sky as our negative space in the image and create the interesting contrast that way. The next thing we're going to want to consider is our shutter speed. Now, if we're using a phone, there are apps that you could download that allow you to control your shutter speed. If we're on a camera here, we can dial in our shutter speed very easily. Think about the effect that you're going for. Do you want to freeze that snow in midair almost as if it's a paused moment in time? Or do you want to shoot with a longer shutter speed and let that snow be blurry, show that it's blowing really hard, or that we're showing motion through a slightly blurry picture? If you want to show the motion of the snow falling, try using something around 1/50th of a second or less. Be careful with how low you go here because the image could become a little bit blurry or out of focus because of hand movement, and really all we're trying to do is blur the snow. So maybe you want to throw your camera on a tripod, or maybe we just want to take a knee and brace your elbow on your knee and almost use your knee as an extra contact point for stability so the image is still sharp, that it allows you to show the motion of the snow falling. Now vary your angle. Everybody takes pictures of their pet standing up, take a picture, great. We've seen it a million times. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing pictures of people's pets, but vary your angle. Get down on their level. Get down into their faces and play with them. Show images of the world of what it looks like from their perspective. Or maybe try getting really high up. Stand on something that allows you to get an elevated perspective. Remember, if the ground is covered in snow and everything's white, this creates another opportunity to give us that really cool negative space that we talked about earlier. Or another perspective, shoot right over their shoulder. Look at the world as if you were looking through their own eyes. Show what they're looking at. Show people what they are interested in while it's snowing. And don't be afraid to get really close to them and get some good close-up detail pictures of the snow and their emotion and how they interact with it. Or get really far away. Just observe from a distance what your pet does when they're just allowed to roam free and enjoy this playful time. Here's a big tip. Don't force it. Don't try and force your pet into some image because you saw it on Instagram or you saw it on TikTok and you thought it was cool or you thought it was funny and you want your pet to do the same thing. That's not who your pet is. That's not their personality necessarily. Let them interact with the world the way they want to, and you almost just stand back and capture it. Listen, our pets have personalities just like us. Some people like the snow, some people don't. Just like humans, some animals love the snow and some don't. Well, we want to capture it in their true environment and how they feel about this winter wonderland. And don't be afraid to get creative here. Use a lens that you wouldn't normally use when you're shooting with your pet. Maybe you want to shoot with a really wide angle lens here and you want to get right in their faces and kind of distort their perspective of what the world looks like. Maybe we want to shoot with a long telephoto lens and just stand back from a long distance and observe what's going on. Consider even bringing a flash with you. Maybe the snow is done falling or it's still lightly snowing, but we're just going to go ahead and throw a plastic bag over a speed light and it'll keep it protected enough. I've done this many times before when I want to use a flash out in inclement weather. I throw a plastic bag over it and we can get some really interesting pictures because most people are afraid to bring a flash out in the snow. Well, if you do it, you might be able to get something that nobody else is doing. Like this picture here. I brought a studio strobe with me and shot this image of my dog while it was still snowing. But the snow was coming down very, very light to the point where it wouldn't damage my equipment. But it was coming down enough that you're still able to see it in the picture. Even though everything is covered in this beautiful, white, soft lighting, we can still add our own lights to create something that most people wouldn't see. Maybe you're making a dramatic picture with really harsh contrast, which is something that we don't normally see when it comes to taking pictures in the snow. Go ahead and get creative. You can make some really fun things here. One time, I went out with Buddy here, and it wasn't snowing, but I decided to take a GoPro. And I got one of those harnesses that are meant to wear a GoPro right on your chest to almost show a first-person view. Well, it just so happens it perfectly fits on my dog when I tighten all the straps down, and I put a GoPro on his back. And I put it on an interval timer. And I just let it take pictures every 5 seconds, and I just let him go on a beach and run around and explore the world. And it's just a camera taking pictures of everything that he's doing from his perspective. And it's just something different that you wouldn't normally see every day. A couple little bonus tips here. Don't be afraid to bring some props. Grab some props, bring them with you. Bring a toy or a ball or something for them to play and interact with you out in the snow. Maybe you bring a cute little jacket or a hat or some boots, and we can make some really fun pictures here with our pup in the snow. And another little bonus tip, don't forget the towel. When they're done playing in the snow, if you're out somewhere or even in your backyard, grab that towel, keep it on hand. You gotta dry them off. We wanna get our little furry friend here nice and warm next to the fireplace as quickly as we can, right? Going out, photographing your animals out in the snow can be a lot of fun. You can get some really interesting pictures. This picture right here is the background of every one of my computers because I just absolutely love what I was able to capture that day. And every time I look at this picture, it just takes me back to the memories that we made while we were out shooting in the snow that day. Now, if you think you're gonna brave the elements and go out and try and shoot your pup next time it snows, go ahead, drop a like below. Or if you'd like, leave a comment below. And I hope next time it snows, you get out and have some fun with your pup. And we'll catch you on the next one. Right, boy? High five. Good boy. Peace. This is what you've been waiting for the whole time, huh? Mm-hmm. Is this what you wanted? Nom, 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 nom. Last piece, sir. Snacks. We love snacks.